This isn't a Batman movie, at least not like the ones we've become accustomed to seeing. But in a way, the Batman actually fixed the superhero genre as a whole and entirely changed the way that many people feel about DC movies. Instead of the typical Hollywood blockbuster Batman formula that we've seen time and time again, we got a highly subjective and creative hero film, focused on the character of Bruce Wayne, which is exactly what we needed. Before we get started, here's a spoiler warning for The Batman. We will be talking about lots of spoilers in the film, so please wait to watch this video until after you've seen it if you don't want it to be spoiled. Now that that's out of the way, you might be wondering, how exactly is The Batman not a Batman movie? And to answer that, we'll have to discuss a few things about the film: its sound design, its cinematography, romanticism, and character. Also, we're going to talk about how the movie kind of fixed the superhero genre and gave us a new take on where the genre should be headed. First things first though, we have to talk about the film's sound. This movie was brought to life not just by visuals, but by its sound design and mixing. The soundtrack and sound design was used to perfection, and this shouldn't come as a shock because the film's director, Matt Reeves, is well known for his intense focus on the sound design for his films, such as the Planet of the Apes movies, as well as the Cloverfield franchise, both of which have unique and utterly striking sound production. The film's composer, Michael Giacchino, is also well known for his work on Pixar movies like Ratatouille and Coco, as well as big-budget action films such as Star Wars, Rogue One, and Avengers Endgame. And I think most people can agree that Ratatouille, Coco, and Endgame have some of the best musical compositions out of any of their similar films, so Giacchino's spectacular work on The Batman comes as no surprise. Two specific pieces about the film's sound design which truly set it apart from the Batman films we've been inundated with over the past few decades are its soundtrack and the Batmobile. In recent years, DC has been known for taking pop songs and just plugging them into scenes where they really aren't necessary. See 2016's Suicide Squad for reference. The Batman, though, actually treats its soundtrack with care, giving us songs which fit the tone of the movie perfectly and which actually make sense for the scenes in which they play. The song Ave Maria, for example, is played over certain scenes with the Riddler, and the tone of the song truly showcases the insanity of his character, while still making sense for him, as it would have been a song he sang as a choir boy in the Wayne Orphanage. The second piece of the film's sound design, which has helped to show where superhero sound design should be going in the future, is the Batmobile. This incarnation of the Batmobile is easily the least flashy of all the Batmobiles we've ever seen, and it was meant to be that way. It's not a tank or a futuristic machine. It's a handcrafted, super powerful muscle car, and it certainly sounds like one. There's actually a prequel novel to the film called Before the Batman, which explains how Bruce began building this incarnation of the Batmobile when he was just 16, constantly trying to find new ways to make it faster. The sound and production designers of the film did a fantastic job bringing this idea to life with a striking build and an even more striking engine sound. The production and sound designers on the film were given lots of creative freedom when making the Batman, and it really shows in the finished product, which is all the more evident in the film's cinematography. This movie is probably one of my favorite pieces of cinematography since 2015's The Revenant. The film's head cinematographer, Greg Fraser, has always produced stunning work, most notably in The Mandalorian, Rogue One, and Dune. Fraser was given a ton of creative freedom to make the film unique and different from all the CGI-infused superhero films, which typically dominate the box office. There are plenty of unique shots present in the movie which lesser cinematographers would have shied away from, but Fraser went at them straight on to give us a picture of what personal superhero stories should look like: brutal, traumatic, and, in the Batman's case, grungy. There are two shots which I think exemplify the film's superior cinematography, with the first being after Bruce flips the Penguin's car. Rather than giving us a third-person omniscient view of the events unfolding, we see the menacing figure of the Batman walking towards us from the Penguin's perspective, giving us a feeling of being trapped and utterly terrified. The other shot is when the Batman is fighting some goons in a pitch-black hallway, lit only by the flashes of gunfire. This scene is reminiscent of the hallway scene in Rogue One, in which Darth Vader cuts down an entire squadron of rebel soldiers. Scenes like this just show how the creators weren't concerned with how much money the film was going to make, but instead focused on how they could tell a compelling story in the most creative way possible. Most of all though, the Batman lets us see the world through Bruce's eyes, sometimes even literally with the help of his contact lens cameras. Seeing things from Bruce's perspective differs heavily from the way most Batman movies have told their stories in the past. Rather than a fourth wall view of the happenings on screen, we get to see inside the mind of Bruce Wayne, just like we saw in the comics, which brings us to our next point: romanticism. The Batman seems like a love letter to the best Batman stories. Not to the films that came before, but to the comic stories which kicked off the intense Batman fan base. The film somewhat romanticized some of the darker and more iconic Batman comics such as Hush and The Long Halloween. In doing so, they were able to make one of the best stories since Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight or the animated Dark Knight Returns. The film reaffirms the love and nostalgia for Batman without taking it in the exact same direction we've seen over and over. Rather than following in the footsteps of Ben Affleck's Batman, Robert Pattinson's takes on a gritty and grungy approach that isn't cringy for once. It's realism at its height. It's the most believable of all the Batman we've seen, and it doesn't waste any time with the Batman origin story that we've seen so many times now that almost everyone can tell exactly when the pearl necklace will be ripped. Romanticism is a subjective art form, and the Batman did a spectacular job of bringing the subjective hero story from comic book pages and placing it directly onto the silver screen. None of this would have been possible, though, without character. Going into this movie, I was expecting yet another unoriginal Batman story with a twist. Cedric Diggory is a bat, but instead of a watered-down, boring take on the same Batman we've seen over and over, we got a dark and gritty story focused on the character behind the mask, Bruce Wayne. This film stuck to its main objective in the story, unlike The Dark Knight Rises, which tried to accomplish too much in too little time. Similar to The Dark Knight Rises, Gotham City is seen as a character of its own too, but it's done much better this time. We actually get to see the people and the heart of the city as they go through traumatic events and how they recover, rather than just giving us a third-person omniscient view of the events happening around them. The film actually gives a surprisingly compelling social commentary about the division of economic classes and how the rich elite often only care about themselves. The Riddler and his gang of followers coined the phrase "no more lies," which is just as much of a commentary on the socio-economic environment of the film as it is a critique of the superhero genre as a whole. The creators of the film recognize that audiences have become somewhat frustrated with the current limits of the superhero genre and the continual stream of carbon copy superhero films which are released. So instead of rehashing the same Batman story we've seen time and time again, we got no more lies. We got a hardcore vigilante whose brutality complicates the heroics we usually associate with him. We got a traumatized and angry orphan, just trying to make the city a better place. Most of all though, we got the world's greatest detective, the same bat that originated in ink on paper. So I'll say it again, this isn't a Batman movie. It's a Bruce Wayne movie, or a detective movie, or better yet, it's a very welcome and realistic approach to the Batman character, unlike any Batman movie we've ever seen before. Anyways, that's going to be all for today. If you liked what you saw, maybe check out the video on your screen for some different content. I make videos on basically anything that interests me in the world of entertainment. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe as it truly does help me out, and thanks for watching Rocket Riley.